Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. I thought I was driving up to check paint samples, but then my contractor whispered not to come alone. They had found a hidden digital lockbox sealed behind a false wall with my sister's name engraved on it like a warning. The moment that lid clicked open, my childhood became evidence against the very people who raised us. By the end of the weekend, one person would be in handcuffs and my sister's life would finally make sense. My name is Azad Green. If you looked at my employee profile on the Bright Mason Creative Group website, you would see a woman who specializes in brand crisis management and architectural marketing. My job description essentially boils down to taking things that are falling apart and making them look intentional, structured, and profitable. I am the person you call when the narrative breaks. I am the person who fixes the cracks in the foundation so the investors do not panic. I live my life in a series of organized spreadsheets and color-coded calendar alerts, and I pride myself on the fact that I am rarely surprised. But as I drove the winding stretch of Highway 26, heading away from the gray drizzle of Portland and toward the high desert of Bend, I felt the distinct vibrating hum of anxiety that no amount of planning could suppress. I was heading to the A-frame, my grandparents' house. It had been sitting empty since Grandpa Warren died, and Grandma Evelyn followed him 6 months later, surrendering to a cancer she had fought with the same quiet steel-spine dignity she applied to everything else. The house was a relic of the 1970s. All cedar siding and massive windows that stared out at the ponderosa pines like unblinking eyes. It was where Taryn and I had spent our summers, and now it was just an asset, a complicated tax burden, a renovation project I was overseeing because Taryn, my younger sister, could barely manage her own rent, let alone a structural remodel. The plan was simple. I was driving down to check on the progress. Jude Keller, the contractor I had hired after interviewing 6 different firms, had told me they were finally ready to stain the exposed beams in the loft. I had paint swatches in my passenger seat and a coffee that had gone cold 40 ago. Then my phone rang. The display on the dashboard read Jude Keller. I tapped the button on the steering wheel, expecting a question about lumber prices or a delay in the permit office. "Hey, Jude," I said, keeping my voice bright. "I'm about an hour out. Please tell me the drywall is dry." There was a silence on the other end that lasted too long. It wasn't the silence of a dropped call. It was the heavy breathing silence of someone trying to decide how to speak. "Yes, sir," Jude said. His voice was wrong. Jude was a mountain of a man, a guy who had been building houses in Oregon for 30 years. He had a voice like gravel tumbling in a mixer, steady, rough, unshakable. But right then, he sounded tight, high, almost like he was shaking. "Yes, sir, where are you exactly?" he asked. "I just passed the turnoff for government camp," I said, my grip tightening on the leather steering wheel. "What is it? Did a pipe burst?" "No," Jude said. "No, the house is fine. Structurally, it is fine." He took a breath that rattled in the receiver. "Yes, sir, we were opening up that weird dead space in the loft, the knee wall behind the chimney. The plan said it was just a void for the ventilation, but the framing didn't look right. So we cut through the drywall." "Okay," I said slowly, "and we found something. It is a false wall. Someone built a secondary enclosure back there. It was insulated, sealed tight." "Okay," I repeated, though a cold prickle was starting to race down my spine. Grandpa had a lot of weird storage habits. "It is probably just old fishing gear or don't come alone." Jude cut me off. The sharpness in his tone made me hit the brakes reflexively. "But I am serious. Yes, sir, do not come alone and do not just come yourself. I need you to get your parents, and I need you to get Taryn." "Jude, you are scaring me." "What is going on?" "My parents are in Portland. Taryn is working. I cannot just drag everyone to the middle of the woods without a reason." "There is a box," Jude said, "a digital lock box. It is bolted to the subfloor inside that wall. It looks like hisser. It looks like military hardware. It is not something you buy at a hardware store." So Grandma was an estate planner. Maybe she kept client files. "Isser," Jude shouted, his professional veneer cracking completely. "Stop talking and listen to me. There's a name engraved on the lid. It was done at the factory, etched into the metal. I stared at the road ahead, the towering pines blurring into a green tunnel. Whose name? It says Taryn Green. The car swerved slightly over the yellow line before I corrected it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. That is impossible. I whispered. Taryn is 28. That wall, you said, that wall looked original. Grandpa has not done construction on that house in 20 years. The box is there, Jude said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. And I sent my crew home. I did not want them seeing this. You get your family and you get down here. I am not touching it again until you are all in the room. The line went dead. I pulled the car onto the narrow gravel shoulder, the tires crunching loudly in the quiet forest air. My hands were trembling so badly I had to grip them together in my lap to make them stop. Taryn. Why would Taryn's name be on a hidden lockbox in our grandparents' attic? Taryn, who could never keep a secret. Taryn, whose life was a series of bad boyfriends, missed credit card payments, and soft-hearted mistakes. Taryn was the one we protected. She wasn't the one who had secrets. I stared at my phone. I had to call them. I had to gather the people who made up the complex, fractured constellation of my family and drag them to a construction site based on a contractor's panic attack. I called Taryn first. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless. Sir, I can't really talk. I am on a shift at the diner. And Taryn, leave. I said, tell them you have a family emergency. I am coming to pick you up in Bend. I need you to meet me at the house. The A-frame. Why, sir, I have rent due in 3 days. I can't just it is about Grandma. I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Jude found something in the walls. Something she left for us. He says we all have to be there. Is it money? Taryn asked, her voice quieting. It broke my heart. How quickly she went to that. Not out of greed, but out of desperation. I do not know, I said. Just go there. Please trust me. Calling my parents was harder. Graham and Elena Green did not do spontaneous. They did scheduled, curated, and presented. When my father answered, I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. They were likely having lunch at the club. Sir, Graham's voice was smooth, a rich baritone that had served him well in sales for 40 years. Your mother and I were just discussing the listing price for the cabin. Have you spoken to the realtor? Dad, you need to drive down here, I said. Now, don't be dramatic, sir. It is a 3-hour drive. We have tickets to the symphony tonight. Jude found something hidden in the loft, I said, pitching my voice low and serious. The tone I used when I had to tell a CEO that his microphone was hot. He says it involves legal documents Grandma hid. He says it looks unfinished. If we do not handle it tonight, Jude is legally obligated to report it to the probate court tomorrow. That was a lie, a complete fabrication. But I knew my father. The threat of legal exposure or losing control of the estate was the only thing that would make him move. We are on our way, he said, the warmth vanishing from his voice. The sun was dipping below the tree line by the time the family assembled in the gravel driveway of the A-frame. The shadows were long and sharp, stretching across the dusty ground like grasping fingers. The house looked like a skeleton. We had stripped the siding on the lower level, exposing the Tyvek wrap, and the windows were covered in plastic sheeting that rippled in the wind. It didn't look like the cozy refuge of my childhood summers anymore. It looked like a crime scene. I got out of my car just as my parents' pristine silver SUV pulled in next to Taryn's battered Honda Civic. The contrast was painful. Taryn climbed out, wearing her diner uniform, a stained apron over jeans, looking pale and exhausted. My mother, Elena, stepped out in cashmere and riding boots, looking at the dust on her shoes with immediate distaste. This had better be worth the drive, Sir Graham said, slamming his car door. He adjusted his watch, a nervous tick he had when he felt out of control. Jude wouldn't tell me a thing on the phone, just said to get here. I don't know any more than you do, I said, walking over to hug Taryn. She felt thin in my arms, fragile. She smelled like frying oil and cheap vanilla perfume. Is everything okay? Taryn whispered against my shoulder. You look like you saw a ghost. Let's just go inside, I said. The front door was unlocked. The air inside felt wrong. Usually, a renovation site smells like sawdust in progress. This smelled stale, heavy. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us to disturb something that wanted to stay buried. "Hello," I called out. "Up here." Jude's voice floated down from the loft. We climbed the spiral staircase, the metal steps clanging softly under our feet. Graham went first, impatient and commanding, then Eleanor, clutching her purse like a shield, then Taryn. I brought up the rear, my stomach churning with a nausea I couldn't explain. The loft was a wide open space under the peak of the roof. Normally, it was flooded with light, but the plastic over the windows turned the twilight into a murky gray haze. Jude was standing in the far corner near the chimney. He wasn't wearing his tool belt. He was standing with his arms crossed, staring at the floor. The room was empty of workers. No saws buzzing, no music playing, just Jude and the box. Jude had laid down a clean blue tarp on the plywood subfloor. Sitting in the center of it was a black object about the size of a briefcase, but thicker. It was matte black, made of heavy reinforced steel. It didn't look like a fire safe you buy at an office supply store. It looked industrial, cold, expensive. It sat there under the exposed wooden beams like a dark void in the room. "What is this?" Graham asked, stepping forward, his voice booming in the quiet space. "Is this what Evelyn was hiding?" "A safe." "Look closer," Jude said. He didn't look at my father. He looked at me, his eyes dark and worried. I stepped forward, pulling Taryn with me. The hole in the wall was visible behind the box, a jagged rectangle cut into the drywall, revealing the dark insulated cavity where this thing had been in. My father crouched down, squinting in the dim light. My mother hovered behind him, her hand covering her mouth. "It's a digital lock," Graham muttered. "Battery powered, probably dead by now." "It is not dead," Jude said softly. I checked. "The panel is active. It is high-end lithium cells designed to last 20 years. 20 years. Taryn asked, her voice trembling. "Grandma didn't have this 20 years ago." "Look at the lid, Taryn," Jude said. I watched my sister lean in. I saw the moment she saw it. She flinched, physically recoiled as if the metal was hot enough to burn her skin. She stumbled back, bumping into me. "What?" Eleanor asked sharply. "What is it?" I looked down. Engraved directly into the black metal in precise white laser-etched letters was a name. Taryn Green. The silence that followed was absolute. It pressed against my eardrums. "I don't understand," Taryn whispered, her eyes wide and terrified. "Why is my name on that? I have never seen that thing in my life." "Evelyn must have put it there," Graham said, his voice taking on a strange edge, something like calculation mixed with confusion. "Maybe she set up a trust upon maturity." He reached out, his hand hovering over the digital keypad. "If it is for Taryn, we need to open it." "No," Jude said. The authority in his voice stopped my father's hand in midair. Graham stood up, bristling, his face turning red. "Excuse me. I am the executive of this estate. Jude, you work for me." "I work for Isla," Jude corrected, stepping between my father in the box. "And I called you all here because this isn't right. I have been in this business a long time. Graham, people hide cash in coffee cans. They hide jewelry in floor safes. They do not build false walls and install military-grade encryption boxes engraved with their granddaughter's name unless something is very, very wrong." "I want to open it," Taryn said suddenly. She sounded small, but there was a steeliness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "It has my name on it." "Taryn, wait," I said, stepping forward. I felt protective, terrified. "We do not know what is in there." "It is my name, Isser," she cried out, tears starting to well in her eyes. "Maybe Grandma left me something. Maybe she knew I would need help." She pushed past me, dropping to her knees on the tarp. She reached her hand out toward the black metal lid. "Wait," Jude said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was barely audible over the wind rattling the plastic sheeting on the windows. Taryn froze, her fingers inches from the keypad. "Before you open it," Jude said, looking from my father to me and then resting his gaze heavily on Taryn, "there is something else you need to know. The reason we found the wall wasn't just because the measurements were off." He pointed a calloused finger at the side of the box near the hinges. "We found scratch marks on the drywall inside the cavity," Jude said, "and look at the seam of the box." I leaned in. There were faint jagged silver scratches on the black metal, fresh ones. "Someone has been here," Jude said, the color draining from his face as he spoke. "Recently. Before you got here, before we got here." He looked up, and his eyes were terrified. "Someone has been trying to break into this wall to get this box out," Jude whispered. "And they failed." To understand why the sight of that black box felt like a physical blow, you have to understand the house. You have to understand that before it was a renovation site wrapped in plastic sheeting and anxiety, it was a fortress built from summers. The A-frame was not just a structure of cedar and glass. It was the third parent that raised us. For Taryn and me, the drive from Portland to Bend was a pilgrimage we made every June. The back seat of our parents' station wagon piled high with sleeping bags and library books. We would watch the landscape change from the moss-choked density of the Willamette Valley to the high arid desert, where the air smelled like sagebrush and sun-baked pine needles, and the loft was ours. It was the apex of the house, a triangular sanctuary suspended above the living room. When the summer storms rolled in over the Cascade Range, shaking the very foundation of the earth, Taryn and I would lie on the shag carpet up there, listening to the thunder crack like a whip against the roof. The rain would hammer against those massive windows, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and green. But we were safe. We built elaborate forts out of Grandma Evelyn's quilts, draping them over the furniture to create tunnels and secret rooms. We whispered stories to each other in the dark, usually about the forest spirits or the bears we were convinced lived just past the wood pile. Grandpa Warren would be downstairs, stoking the cast-iron stove until the heat rose up to the loft in thick, drowsy waves. He was a man of few words, a retired engineer who expressed love through structural stability and well-stacked firewood. But it was Grandma Evelyn who was the house's heartbeat. Evelyn Green was not a typical grandmother who baked cookies and knitted sweaters. She was sharp, meticulous, and fiercely intelligent. She was an estate planner who specialized in retirement assets for seniors, a woman who viewed chaos as a personal enemy. She met her clients in the small den off the kitchen, a room that always smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I remember creeping down the spiral stairs as a teenager, hearing her voice drift from the open door of the den. It was never raised, never impatient. It was a calm, steady timbre that promised order. "I am here to protect what you built. Robert," she would say to a trembling widower, "we are going to make sure the tax liability is minimized. We are going to secure this for your grandchildren." She was a guardian. That was how I always saw her. She kept the wolves at bay for people who were too old or too tired to fight for themselves. She treated every signature, every notary stamp, every file folder with a reverence that bordered on religious. That was why the change, when it came, felt so jarring. It started about 5 years before Grandpa died. I was fresh out of college, working my first junior marketing job, and Taryn was drifting between semesters at community college. We were visiting for a long weekend in August. The air was thick with wildfire smoke, casting a sickly orange pall over the mountains. My father, Graham, had started showing up unannounced. Before that, my parents came only for scheduled holidays. But that summer, Graham's silver sedan seemed to be in the driveway every other weekend. He would walk in with that salesman's smile of his, the one that dazzled his clients, but always made me feel like I was being assessed for value. He would bring expensive wine, steaks from the butcher in town, and a frantic, vibrating energy that made the dogs nervous. He did not come to relax. He came to talk business. I remember sitting on the deck one evening, pretending to read a book while listening to the conversation drifting through the screen door. "It is just a question of diversification," Evelyn Graham was saying. His voice was smooth, charming, but there was a serrated edge to it. "I have opportunities that are yielding 12% right now, safe, secure. Why keep the liquid assets sitting in those stagnant municipal bonds? I am comfortable with my portfolio, Graham," Evelyn replied. Her voice was cool, the same tone she used when Taryn or I tried to negotiate a later curfew. "It is not just your portfolio I am thinking about," Graham pressed. "You have clients, mother, people who trust you. I could help them. We could combine our networks. I could take over the heavy lifting of the account management and you could just handle the relationships." You are getting older. You should be resting. My clients trust me because I do not take risks, Evelyn said. I heard the sound of a file cabinet sliding shut with a definitive thud, and because I keep their affairs private, even from family. I am hardly family. Graham laughed, but it was a dry, humorless sound. I am your son. I am in the industry. It is not like I am a stranger off the street asking for the keys to the vault. The answer is no. Graham, let's enjoy dinner. The conversations happened again and again that year. Graham would ask about specific accounts. He would ask who she was using for her compliance audits. He would ask casually over coffee where she kept the physical deeds to the properties she managed. Evelyn became a fortress. She stopped leaving files on her desk. She started locking the den door even when she just went to the kitchen for water. And then the loft changed. It happened the winter before Grandpa died. Taryn and I had driven up for Christmas. We hauled our bags up the spiral staircase, ready to claim our old space, only to find a new door installed at the top of the landing. It was solid oak, heavy, and fitted with a deadbolt. Grandma, I called out, confused. Why is the loft locked? Evelyn came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked tired. Her eyes, usually so bright and sharp, looked shadowed. Oh, that she said, waving a hand dismissively. Warren and I are using it for storage now. It was getting too drafty up there for guests. You girls can take the guest room downstairs. But all our stuff is up there, Terence said, looking crushed. The fort, my old sketches. It is just storage now, honey, Evelyn said, turning back to the stove. Best to leave it be. She refused to look at us. It was the first time I realized my grandmother could lie. Grandpa Warren died the following spring, a massive heart attack while he was chopping wood. He was gone before he hit the ground. The silence he left behind was deafening. The A-frame, which had always felt solid and warm, suddenly felt vast and hollow. Evelyn did not leave. Everyone told her to sell. My father pushed hard for her to move into a luxury assisted living facility in Portland close to them. He brought brochures. He talked about equity release and burden of maintenance. Evelyn threw the brochures in the fireplace. I am staying in my house. She said she stayed for 3 more years. Even after the cancer diagnosis, she fought the illness with the same quiet ferocity she applied to everything else. She turned the living room into a hospital ward, refusing to go to a hospice center. I took time off work to be there. Taryn dropped everything to move in for the last 6 months, becoming her primary caregiver. It was during those months that the tension with Graham became toxic. He would come to visit, standing over his dying mother's bed, and the conversation would inevitably pivot to paperwork. We need to make sure the power of attorney is updated. Mother, he would say, holding her frail hand. We need to make sure I can access the safe deposit box if things decline. Evelyn would just close her eyes and feign sleep. When she died, the will was read in a lawyer's office in downtown Bend. Graham walked in wearing a $3,000 suit, looking solemn but ready. He had his own notebook out, prepared to tally the assets. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had known Evelyn for 30 years, pushed his glasses up his nose and read the document. It was short, brutally short. I, Evelyn Rose Green, being of sound mind, leave the entirety of my estate, including the property at 4402 Pine Ridge Road and all personal contents therein to my granddaughters, Isser Green and Taryn Green, to be shared equally. There was no trust, no executive fee for Graham, no mention of him at all other than a token bequest of a grandfather clock. I remember the silence in that room. It was heavier than the silence in the loft. This is a mistake, Graham said, his voice quiet and dangerous. She was confused. She was on heavy medication at the end. The will was drafted 5 years ago. Graham, Mr. Henderson said, before the diagnosis, before the medication, my father stood up, looked at Taryn, then at me, and walked out without a word. That was 6 months ago. Since then, the house had become a beautiful, crushing weight. The reality of adult inheritance was not nostalgic. It was a spreadsheet of property taxes, insurance premiums, and deferred maintenance costs, that totaled more than Taryn made in a year. I was the pragmatist. I looked at the rotting deck and the single-pane windows and saw a money pit. I wanted to renovate and sell. The market in Bend was exploding. We could walk away with enough money to set Taryn up for life, to pay off her debts, to give me the capital to start my own firm. Taryn resisted. To her, selling the house was like selling a limb. She cried over the color swatches. She touched the walls like they were living skin, but she knew the math. She knew she couldn't afford to buy me out, and she couldn't afford the upkeep. So we agreed to renovate. We hired Jude. We started stripping the skin off our childhood to make it palatable for a buyer from California, which brought me back to the present moment. The memory of the summers, the storms, and the secrets washed over me, only to be shattered by the cold, stale air of the loft. The plastic sheeting on the window snapped in the draft. I looked at Jude, then at the black box with my sister's name on it. The dread in the room was palpable. "You said someone tried to break in," I said, my voice sounding thin in the large space. "Look over there," Jude said, gesturing with his chin toward the far corner of the loft where the roof line met the floor. I walked over, my boots echoing on the subfloor. Pushed into the corner was an old piece of furniture I recognized instantly. It was a cedar blanket chest one grandpa had built himself. It had been sitting in that corner for as long as I could remember, usually piled high with old National Geographics. Now the top was cleared. I knelt down. The chest had a simple iron latch, but the wood around the latch was mangled. Deep gouging splinters of raw wood stuck out, where someone had taken a crowbar or a heavy screwdriver to it. They had tried to pry it open with violent force. They did not know where the wall safe was, Jude said from behind me. They were looking for it. They tore up the closet downstairs, too, and the panel behind the water heater. But here they got frantic. I ran my finger over the splintered wood. This wasn't the work of a random junkie looking for copper wire. This was rage. This was someone who knew there was something to find, but didn't know where Evelyn had buried it. I looked back at the false wall, the hidden cavity, the military lock box. Grandma Evelyn hadn't just locked the loft to keep the drafts out. She hadn't been hiding Christmas presents. She had been building a vault, and she had done it right under our noses. While we worried about her cancer and my father's bruised ego, she knew someone was coming for her. I stood up, the dust of the loft clinging to my jeans. I looked at my sister, who was still staring at her own name etched in steel. "Open it," I said to Taryn. My father stepped forward. "I should wait for a lawyer. If this is financial, open it," I repeated, my voice hard. "It is addressed to her." Taryn reached out, her hand trembling, and pressed the release button on the side of the digital pad. We didn't have the code, but as her finger brushed the biometric scanner, I hadn't noticed before. The box beeped a sharp, high-pitched chirp. It wasn't a code. It was a fingerprint scanner, and it turned green. The heavy latch clicked. The lid popped up an inch with a hydraulic hiss. My sister looked up at me, her face pale as a sheet. I never gave her my fingerprint. She must have gotten it from something else, Jude whispered. Or he didn't finish the sentence. Taryn lifted the heavy steel lid, and we all leaned in to see what Evelyn Green had been protecting with her life. The lid of the black steel box rose with a slow hydraulic hiss that sounded violently loud in the silence of the loft. It stopped at a 90 angle, exposing the interior to the gray light filtering through the plastic sheeting. We stood in a circle around it, a tribunal of ghosts and liars. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt distinct from the heavy, suffocating stillness of the room. I looked at Taryn. She was staring into the dark cavity of the box. Her face drained of all color, her hands gripping the front of her stained apron so tightly her knuckles were white. Then I looked at my father. Graham Greene was a man who lived his life in a state of performative confidence. He was the guy who laughed loudest at the country club, the one who always knew which wine to order. But in that moment, staring down a military lockbox hidden by his dead mother, he did not look confused. He did not look shocked. He looked prepared. His shoulders were set. His jaw was tight. He was not reacting to new information. He was processing a scenario he had already run through his mind a dozen times. It was the look of a man who had rehearsed his lines in the mirror before coming on stage. "Well," Graham said, his voice flat, "let us see what she was hiding." He reached for the box. "Don't touch it," Jude said. The contractor stepped forward, effectively blocking my father's arm. Jude's face was grim, his eyes scanning the interior of the false wall one last time. "Before you put your hands inside," Jude said, addressing me but keeping his body angled toward Graham, "you need to understand what we saw when we cut the drywall. Look at the insulation batting behind the box." I leaned over, peering into the jagged hole in the wall. The pink fiberglass insulation was matted down, compressed in a way that looked unnatural. "It is scraped," Jude said. "Someone used a hook or a wire to fish around in there. And look at the marks on the studs. Those are fresh gouges from a pry bar. Someone knew there was a void here. They knew the dimensions. They just did not know exactly how to trigger the release mechanism." "So you are saying it was a burglary attempt," Elena said, her voice trembling. She pulled her cashmere cardigan tighter around herself. "Junkies. It is always junkies out here. Junkies smash windows, Mrs. Green," Jude said, his voice low. "They do not drill pilot holes to locate a specific structural void behind a knee wall. Whoever did this was looking for this specific box." I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me. I reached into the box. The interior was lined with crushed velvet, black and pristine. Resting in the center were just two items: a single thick cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax, an archaic touch that felt entirely like Evelyn, and a plain piece of white notebook paper. Folded once, I picked up the envelope first. My hand shook and the paper rattled. On the front in Evelyn's distinct spidery cursive were the words for Eiler or Taryn. "Open only if I'm gone." "Give that to me," Graham said, snapping his fingers. "I am the executive. It is addressed to us." "Dad," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I took a step back, positioning my body between him and the evidence. "Not you." Taryn made a small choked sound. "Isser, read it." I broke the wax seal. The crack of the dried wax sounded like a gunshot. Inside was a single sheet of heavy bond paper covered in dense handwriting. I began to read, my eyes scanning the lines, and the whirl seemed to tilt on its axis. "What does it say?" Taryn whispered. I swallowed hard. "She says she suspected someone was moving her client's retirement funds." "But," Elena asked, blinking, "that is ridiculous. Evelyn was the most ethical woman in the state. She wasn't the one moving them," I said, looking up at my father. He was staring at the letter in my hand with a gaze so intense it felt physical. "She says she found irregularities. Transfers were routed through administrative accounts. She did not recognize large sums. 200,000 here, 500,000 there. She was confused," Graham said quickly. Too quickly. "The Chio brain. It made her paranoid. We all knew that. She says the paper trail was being built to point to a specific account holder." I continued, ignoring him. I felt the blood draining from my face. "She says the signatures on the authorization forms were forged, but the identity used for the beneficiary accounts was real." I looked at my sister. "Taryn," I said softly. "Beep." Taryn breathed. "I don't even have a savings account." "Isser. She says the accounts are in your name." I read from the letter. "She says someone used your identity to create a shell to make it look like you were the one draining the seniors' funds." Taryn's knees gave out. She didn't fall, but she slumped against the wooden support beam, sliding down until she was crouching on the floor, her hands covering her mouth. "That is insane," Taryn sobbed. "I never signed anything. I don't know how to do any of that." "We know," I said, dropping to my knees beside her. "We know you didn't." I reached for the second piece of paper, the plain notebook page. "There is more," I said. The note was shorter. It contained a string of alphanumeric characters, a password, and a URL for a secure cloud storage server. But it was the handwritten postscript at the bottom that stopped my heart. Note: this lockbox was ordered from a security firm in Seattle 3 years ago. The invoice lists the purchaser as Taryn Green. It was delivered to a P.O. box in Bend that is registered to Taryn Green. I did not commission this box. I intercepted the delivery notification and collected it before the person who ordered it could use it. They intended to plant it here, with the stolen money inside to be found by the police. I read the line 3 times. The box wasn't Evelyn's vault. The box was the weapon. Someone had bought this high-tech piece of hardware using Taryn's stolen identity, planning to stash the cash or the evidence inside it, hide it in the house, and then tip off the authorities. Evelyn had found out. She had stolen the trap and turned it into a sanctuary for the truth. "What is that note?" Graham demanded. He took a step onto the tar, his dress shoes crunching on the plastic. "I stopped reading this nonsense. Your grandmother was losing her mind. She was imagining conspiracies. She says the box was ordered in Taryn's name," I said, looking up at him. "Did you know that?" Graham froze for a split second. The mask slipped. I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated rage in his eyes. Not at the situation, but at me, at the question. "How would I know that?" He snapped. "I told you this is all a mistake. Taryn has had financial trouble for years. Maybe she did order it. Maybe she forgot. I did not order a military safe." Taryn screamed from the floor. "I can't even afford new tires." "You have a history of instability, Taryn," Graham said, his voice dropping to that reasonable paternal tone that made me want to scream. "You get confused. You signed things without reading them. We have cleaned up your messes before." "Stop it," I said. I looked back at the box. The interior was empty now, or so I thought. As I shifted the angle of the lid, a glint of light caught something taped to the very top of the inner casing, tucked deep inside the lip where you wouldn't see it unless you were looking for it. It was small, a plastic rectangle. I reached up, shielding the motion with my body so my parents couldn't see. I peeled the tape back. It was a key card, plain white with a magnetic strip on the back. Written on the plastic and permanent marker were 2 words: "Second door." My mind raced. Second door? What second door? The loft only had the one entrance. I felt a sudden piercing clarity. Evelyn knew we would find this. She knew Graham would be here. She knew he would try to spin the narrative to dismiss the letter as the ramblings of a dying woman. She had held something back. This box wasn't the end of the trail. It was just the first breadcrumb. I palmed the key card, sliding it up into the sleeve of my sweater in one fluid motion. "There is nothing else in here," I lied. I stood up, clutching the letter in the note to my chest. "We need to call the police," Jude said. "If this involves fraud and identity theft, no police." Graham barked. The force of his voice made everyone jump. He took a deep breath, smoothing his tie. "We are not calling the police. Think about what this looks like. If we bring the authorities in now, they see a box with Taryn's name, ordered by Taryn in a house Taryn owns. They will arrest her before we can explain a thing." He looked at Taryn, his expression softening into a look of pity that felt like a slap. "I am trying to protect you, sweetheart," he said to her. "We keep this private. We figure out what Mom was confused about, and we destroy this box before it ruins your life." "Destroy it?" I asked. "It is evidence. It is evidence against your sister," Graham shouted, losing his composure again. "Do you want her in prison? Because that is where this leads. This letter isn't proof of her innocence. Sir, it is a confession of her guilt written by a grandmother who was trying to rationalize why her sweet granddaughter was stealing from her clients. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He had taken Evelyn's defense of Taryn and twisted it into an accusation. "Give me the letter, sir," he said, holding out his hand. I looked at the letter, then I looked at the note with the loving codes. "No," I said. "I am keeping it," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I need to read it again. I need to process it." "You are spiraling," Elena said, stepping up beside Graham. "Listen to your father. He knows how these things work." "I'm sure he does," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy and double-edged. I saw Graham's eyes narrow. He realized then that he was losing me. He realized that the daughter he thought was just a compliant organizer, a fixer of other people's problems, was suddenly a problem he couldn't fix. "Fine," Graham said, his voice turning cold. "You keep the papers, but I am taking the box. We cannot leave it here with the house under construction. It is not safe." He walked past May, shoved Jude aside with his shoulder, and slammed the lid of the box shut. He didn't need the code to close it. He lifted it by the handle. It must have weighed 40 lb, but he lifted it like it was nothing. "We are leaving," he said to Elena. "Taryn, you should come with us. You look unwell." "I am staying with Isser," Taryn whispered. She scrambled up from the floor, moving behind me like a shield. Graham looked at us, his two daughters standing against him in the dusty, half-destroyed attic of his childhood. "Suit yourselves," he said, "but do not make any calls until we talk tomorrow. Do not be stupid." He turned and walked down the spiral staircase, the heavy metal steps clinging under his weight. Elena followed him, casting one last unreadable look at us before disappearing. We stood in silence until we heard the front door slam and the engine of their SUV roar to life. Only then did I let out the breath I had been holding. My legs felt like water. I sank down onto the tarp next to the empty space where the box had been. "He took it," Taryn said, her voice hollow. "He took the proof." "Not all of it," I said. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the white key card. "What is that?" Jude asked, stepping closer. "It was taped to the lid," I said. "Grandma left us a back door." I looked at the words. "Second door" scrolled in marker. "The box was staged," I said, the realization settling over me like a shroud. "Graham or whoever is working with him, they ordered the box to frame you, Tan. They were going to fill it with fake evidence and plant it here. But Grandma found it first. She intercepted the delivery. She wrote that letter, put it inside, and hid it in the wall herself." "So Graham didn't know it was in the wall?" Jude asked. "He knew she hid something," I said. "That is why he has been breaking into the house. That is why he was asking about the walls. But he didn't know she had used his own weapon against him." I looked at Taryn. She was still shaking, but her eyes were focused on the key card in my hand. "He is going to destroy that box," Taryn said. "He is going to melt it down or throw it in the river." "Let him," I said, a cold resolve hardening in my chest. "He thinks he cleaned up the mess. He thinks he won." I stood up, clutching the key card so tight the edges dug into my palm. "He doesn't know there is a second door." The drive back to Portland was a blur of rain and red tail lights. I do not remember passing the mountain pass or the long flat stretch of the valley floor. I only remember the Norseer. It sat heavy in my stomach, a cold, lean weight that had nothing to do with the winding roads and everything to do with the man I had watched drive away with a lockbox full of lies. My father. The suspect wasn't a faceless corporation or a stranger who had hacked a database. It was the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, the man who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, even though that marriage had ended 3 years later. I arrived at my apartment in the Pearl District just after 1:00 in the morning. My place was the opposite of the A-frame. It was all concrete, glass, and white surfaces. It was curated, minimal, and safe. But as I locked the door behind me and threw my keys on the console table, the silence felt hostile. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I walked straight to my home office, the city lights outside casting long, pale rectangles across the floor. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I had to type the password 3 times before I got it right. I pulled the crumpled note from my pocket. Evelyn's handwriting was shaky, the ink bleeding slightly where her hand must have rested too long on the page. "Servers securevault.net, user Agark, archivist Pass Pine Needle 1974. Storm." I typed it in. The screen refreshed. A folder icon appeared labeled simply "The Ghosts." I clicked it. I expected the meticulous organization I knew my grandmother for. Evelyn Green color-coded her spice rack. She filed her tax returns in binders labeled by fiscal quarter. But this folder was a wreck. It was a digital graveyard of panic. There were hundreds of files, but they weren't organized. They were dumped. Scans were crooked, some blurry as if she had been holding the camera with trembling hands. Some file names were just strings of random numbers, while others were typed in all caps like screams. "Look at this one. They did not sign this. Check the date." It looked like the work of a woman who was racing against 2 clocks, the cancer eating her body, and the thief dismantling her legacy. I opened the first file, a PDF labeled Caldwell Transfer March. It was a bank statement for a Marjorie Caldwell. I recognized the name. She was one of Evelyn's oldest clients, a retired school principal. I scrolled down the transaction list. March 12th, wire transfer, $50,000. Recipient Administrative Holding LLC. I frowned. I'd opened the next file. Caldwell O form. It was a scan of a transfer authorization form. The signature at the bottom read Marjorie Caldwell, but the stroke looked shaky, weak. Below it, in the section for the authorized financial representative, was a signature that stopped my breath. Taryn Green. I stared at it. The signature was good. It was terrifyingly good. It had the same erratic slant as Taryn's handwriting, the way she looped her G's. If I didn't know Taryn, if I didn't know she broke out in hives when she had to fill out a W-9 form, I would have believed it. But then I zoomed in. The resolution of the scan was high. I could see the pixelation of the ink. The pressure was wrong. Taryn pressed hard when she wrote. She carved her name into the paper. This signature floated on the surface. It was a trace of forgery practiced until it was muscle memory. I opened another file and another. The patent was sickeningly clear. $10,000 from the estate of Robert Miller, $25,000 from the trust of Sarah Jenkins, $12,000 liquidated from a municipal bond account. All of them funneled into administrative or consulting shell accounts, and every single paper trail ended with Taryn. Taryn was listed as the account manager. Taryn was the secondary signer. Taryn was the one receiving the confirmation emails. My father hadn't just stolen money. He had built a floorless, watertight vessel to carry the blame, and he had christened it with his youngest daughter's name. I felt like I was going to throw up. I stood up and paced the small room, rubbing my temples. Why, Taryn? Why not a stranger? Why destroy your own child? I went back to the screen. I needed to see more. I clicked on a folder labeled Notary Proof. Inside was a single image. It was a close-up photograph of a notarized affidavit confirming the identity of the account holder as Taryn Green. The notary stamp was clear. State of Oregon Commission expires June 2024. I looked at the handwritten date next to the stamp, April 4th. I knew that handwriting. I froze. My face inches from the screen. It wasn't Taryn's handwriting. It wasn't Graham's heavy block lettering. It was elegant looped. The in April was formed with a distinct artistic flourish, the tail curling up and over the letter, like a protective roof. It was my mother's handwriting. Eleanor, the rube seemed to tilt. My mother, the woman who worried about appearances, who bought cashmere, who criticized Taryn's shoes but always sent her home with leftovers. I had thought she was just passive. I thought she was a victim of Graham's domineering personality, a trophy wife who looked the other way. But you do not accidentally notarize a forged document. You do not accidentally validate the identity of a daughter who isn't in the room. She was in on it. She wasn't just watching the fire. She was fanning the flames. I sank back into the chair, the leather creaking loudly. They were both doing it. My parents, the pillar of the community, the couple who donated to the symphony, had cannibalized their daughter's life to feed their own greed. I clicked on the next file type. It wasn't a document. It was an MP3. Kitchen conversation Dector24.mpp3. I plugged in my headphones. The timestamp was from Christmas Eve, 2 years ago, the last Christmas before Grandpa died. I pressed play. There was a burst of static, then the sound of clinking porcelain. They were having tea. More sugar, Evelyn's voice. She sounded stronger then, sharp. I am fine. Mother, sit down. You are hovering. Graham, I am not hovering. Graham, I am reading. A pause. The sound of paper rustling. Who is Grant Hollis? Silence. A long-stretched silence that hissed with tape noise. Graham asked. His tone was casual, light. The tone he used when he was lying. Grant Hollis. Evelyn repeated. His name is on 3 of the transfer requests you sent over for the Miller file. You listed him as an external consultant. I looked him up. There is no Grant Hollis registered with the Financial Ethics Board. There is no LinkedIn profile. There is no office address. He is a freelancer, Graham said. He works out of Seattle. Good guy. Sure, I use him for the messy tax stuff. I called the number listed on the invoice. Evelyn said her voice had dropped an octave. It was the voice of the prosecutor. Now it went to a burner phone. Graham, a prepaid mobile. You are checking up on me. Graham let out a laugh. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. I bring you business. I try to modernize your dusty little operation, and you are playing detective. I am protecting my clients, Evelyn said, and I am protecting this family. This looks like laundering. Graham, watch your tone, Graham said. The charm was gone. The voice was cold, hard, and terrifyingly flat. You do not know how the modern market works. You are counting pennies in a jar while I'm trying to build an empire. Brad Hollis is necessary. He handles the things that need to be handled. He doesn't exist, Evelyn said softly. Does he? Brad Hollis is me, Graham said. Or he is Taryn, or he is whoever I need him to be to get the deal done. Does it matter? It matters if you are stealing, Evelyn whispered. I am not stealing. The sound of a cup slamming down on a table. I am managing. I am leveraging. And if you say one word about this to Warren or to the girls, I will make sure the board knows about that lapse in judgment you had with the Henderson estate in 1982. That was an accounting error. Evelyn's voice shook. I fixed it. History is written by the people with the microphone, Mother Graham said, and right now I have the microphone. Let it go for everyone's sake. The audio cut out with a sharp click. I sat in the dark, breathing hard. My skin felt cold. Brant Hollis. It was an alias, a ghost he wore to move through walls. I scanned the rest of the folder. I saw the name Grant Hollis on invoices, on email chains, on consulting agreements. He was the mechanism. Taryn was the scapegoat, and Graham was the puppet master. I was about to close the laptop, my brain saturated with horror, when I saw one last file at the very bottom of the list. It was a text file, but the icon was glitching. The title was in all caps. If you are reading this, he is getting bold text. I double-clicked it. The text editor opened, but the file was corrupted. Lines of code and gibberish symbols filled the screen. Squares, triangles, seemingly random sequences of letters. But near the bottom, amidst the digital noise, was one paragraph of clear text. It looked like Evelyn had typed it in a hurry, perhaps moments before she lost access or before she died. I figured it out too late. I asked him why. I asked him why he couldn't use a random identity, why he had to use her. He laughed. He actually laughed. He said Taryn was perfect because she was already broken. She had bad credit. She had a divorce. She had a history of being scattered. He said, I chose Taryn because her life was already on fire. No one notices if you throw another match into an inferno. I stared at the screen until the words blurred into gray streaks. Her life was already on fire. It wasn't bad luck. Taryn's struggles, the denied loans, the weird tax audits she complained about, the letters from collections agencies she swore were mistakes. They weren't accidents. They weren't because she was scattered. They were him. He had been gaslighting her for years. He had been slowly, methodically destroying her credibility, chipping away at her financial standing so that when the time came to freeing her for a federal crime, the narrative would fit perfectly. Of course, Taryn stole the money. Everyone would say she was desperate. She was unstable. He hadn't just framed her. He had groomed her life to be the perfect vessel for his crimes. I slammed the laptop shut. The silence in my apartment was gone. It was replaced by a roaring in my ears that sounded like rage. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at it. It was a text from Taryn. Sir, are you okay? I am at the motel. I can't sleep. I keep seeing his face when he took the box. I picked up the phone. I didn't text back. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city rain. I had spent my entire career managing crisis, spinning stories, fixing other people's disasters. But I was done fixing. I was going to burn it down. But first, I had to tell my sister that her bad luck had a name. I drove back to Bend just as the sun was trying to burn through the morning fog. I had not slept. The caffeine in my system was vibrating in my fingertips, but my mind had moved past exhaustion into a state of cold crystalline clarity. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling of my apartment, replaying the audio of my father's laugh, dissecting the cruelty of a man who had set his own daughter on fire just to keep himself warm. I met Taryn at a small coffee shop tucked away on Galveston Avenue. It was the kind of place we used to go to in high school to pretend we were adults, drinking mokers and talking about boys. When Taryn walked in, my heart broke all over again. She looked like she had aged 5 years overnight. Her eyes were puffy, rimmed with red, and she was wearing an oversized sweater that swallowed her hands. She was trying to smile, that reflexive, apologetic smile she used whenever she felt like she was taking up space, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. She didn't order anything. She just wrapped her hands around the glass of water the waitress had set down. "Did you sleep?" "No," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were the printouts I had made at 4:00 in the morning. "We need to talk, Taryn, and I need you to listen to me. Really listen, even if it sounds crazy." Taryn looked at the folder, then at me. "Is this about the box Graham texted me this morning? He said he took care of it. He said we should just move on." "He didn't take care of it," I said, my voice low. "He destroyed it because it proved what he has been doing to you." I slid the first document across the table. It was the scan of the transfer authorization with her forged signature. "Look at this," I said. Taryn squinted at the paper. "What is it?" "It looks like a bank form. It is a transfer for $50,000 from one of Grandma's clients," I said. "Look at the signature at the bottom." Taryn looked. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That looks like, but I didn't sign that, sir. I swear I have never even heard of the Miller Trust." "I know you didn't," I said. I slid the next paper and the next. "There are dozens of them, Taryn. Accounts opened in your name, shell companies registered to your address, loans taken out against assets you do not own." Taryn started to shake. It wasn't a subtle tremor. It was a violent shivering that rattled the water glass on the table. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would my name be on these? Is it identity theft? Like a hacker?" "It is not a hacker," I said. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Her skin was freezing. "Taryn, look at the dates." She looked down. 2019, 2020. "Think back," I said. "Think about when things started going wrong for you. The divorce, the credit checks." Taryn's eyes widened. "When Mike and I split up, he went crazy. He kept accusing me of hiding money. He said his lawyer found assets I hadn't disclosed. I thought he was just being paranoid. I thought he was trying to get out of paying alimony." "He wasn't paranoid," I said gently. "He found these accounts. He found the money Graham hid, but because it was in your name, it looked like you were the one hoarding it. And the loans," Taryn said, her voice rising in pitch. "I tried to get a car loan last year. They denied me. They said my debt-to-income ratio was too high. I told them I didn't have any debt besides my student loans, but they wouldn't listen. They treated me like I was lying." "You weren't lying," I said. "But on paper, you were leveraged up to your neck. Graham was using your credit history as his personal slush fund." "But how?" Taryn asked, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "How did he get the information? How did he verify it? Did you ever give him your documents?" I asked. "Your social security card, your birth certificate." Taryn froze. She stared at the rain streaking the window, her mind working backward through the years. "A few years ago," she said slowly, "right after the divorce, I was a mess. I couldn't keep track of anything. Graham came over one day. He brought groceries. He was being so nice." She looked at me, the realization dawning on her face like a horror movie realization. "He said he wanted to help me get my taxes sorted out," she whispered. "He said he could get me a better refund if I let his guy handle it. He asked for copies of everything, my license, my social. He even had me sign a few blank forms because he said he didn't want to bother me with the paperwork later." "And you trusted him?" I said. "He's our dad, sir," Taryn cried out, causing a couple at the next table to look over. She lowered her voice, trembling. "He is our dad. He held me when I was crying over Mike. He told me he would fix it. He didn't fix it," I said, feeling the anger burn hot in my chest. "He broke it. He used that information to build a paper person named Taryn Green, who was a fraud and a thief. And he did it because he knew no one would question it. He knew everyone would look at you, the struggling artist, the one going through a messy divorce, and think, of course she did it." She was desperate. Taryn pulled her hand away from mine. She looked sick. It wasn't just about the money, was it? She asked. No, I said. It was about credibility. He needed to make sure that if anyone ever found out, you would look guilty. He destroyed your reputation so that you couldn't defend yourself. Taryn sat back in the booth. She looked small, defeated, but then she did something I didn't expect. She reached down into her tote bag and pulled out a shoebox. It was battered, taped together with duct tape. I brought this, she said. I didn't know why. Just when you called me about the documents, I remembered this box. What is it? It is the junk mail, Taryn said. I never throw anything away that looks official. I am too scared I will miss a bill. I just shove it all in here. She opened the lid. Inside was a chaotic mess of envelopes, credit card offers, insurance flyers, window envelopes with urgent red stamps. Taryn dug through the pile, her hands shaking. I found this one this morning, she said. I kept it because I didn't recognize the name, but the address was mine. I thought maybe a previous tenant lived there. She handed me a crumpled white envelope. The postmark was from 3 years ago. The return address was a P.O. box in Seattle. The address was Grant Hollis, Cotter and Green. Grant Hollis, I whispered. Who is he? Taryn asked. He doesn't exist, I said. He is the alias Graham used. Elin found his name in the files. She tried to track him down. I turned the envelope over. It had been opened. Did you read what was inside? I asked. It was just a confirmation for a storage unit rental, Taryn said. I thought it was junk, but look at the handwritten note on the back of the envelope. I flipped it over, scrolled in blue ink. In handwriting I recognized instantly were 3 numbers. 594, that is Dad's handwriting. I said. He must have been at my apartment, Taryn said, her voice sounding far away. He used to stop by to check on the furnace or drop off mail. He must have seen this come in, opened it, wrote something down, and then left it thinking I would just toss it. 594, I repeated. It could be a unit number or a code. Yes, sir, Taryn said, looking me dead in the eye. My life wasn't bad luck, was it? No, I said, it was sabotage. All those times I felt like a failure, she said, her voice cracking. All those times I thought I was just stupid with money or that the universe was punishing me. It was him. She wasn't crying anymore. The tears had stopped, replaced by a dull, horrified shock. My phone rang. It was lying face up on the table. The screen showed unknown caller. I stared at it. Answer it, Taryn whispered. I picked it up and swiped the green icon. Hello. Stop digging, Isser. The voice was male. It was digitally altered, metallic, and rasping, but there was a cadence to it, a specific aggressive rhythm that made the hair on my arms stand up. Who is this? I demanded. Your sister has had a hard run, the voice said. It would be a shame if she ended up facing federal charges because you couldn't leave well enough alone. She can walk away clean. We can make the debt go away, but only if you listen. I am not listening to you, I said, and I am not scared of you. You should be. The voice said, you have no idea how deep the roots go. Go home, Isser. Paint the house. Sell it. Forget the box. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Who was it? Taryn asked. They know we are looking, I said. They are scared. Taryn's phone chimed. The sharp, cheerful sound of a text message alert cut through the tension like a knife. Taryn looked down at her screen. She froze. It is Graham, she said. She turned the phone so I could see it. The message was short, simple, and terrifying in its implication. We need to talk alone. Come to the house. Do not tell Isser. We drove to the assisted living facility in a silence that felt heavy enough to crack the windshield. The Pines at Mirror Pond was one of those places that cost $6,000 a month to make you forget you were dying. It had manicured lawns, a water feature that bubbled politely near the entrance, and a reception desk that looked more like a hotel concierge than a medical station. Taryn sat in the passenger seat of my rental car, picking at a loose thread on her sweater. She had not said a word since we left the coffee shop. The text from Graham, "We need to talk alone," was hanging over us like a guillotine blade, but we had decided to ignore it. We had one stop to make first. We were going to see Marjorie Caldwell. Marjorie was the name on the first file I had opened in Grandma's digital graveyard. She was the retired principal who had lost $50,000 in a single afternoon. We found her in the common room sitting in a wing-back chair by the window, watching the rain hit the glass. She was tiny with hair like spun silver and eyes that were sharp and blue behind rimless glasses. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like the kind of woman who could silence a cafeteria with a single look. "You have Evelyn's chin," Marjorie said the moment I introduced myself. She didn't smile, but her voice was warm. "And you must be Taryn. Evelyn talked about you. She said you were the artist." Taryn flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of her shoulders, but I felt it. To hear that Grandma spoke of her with pride while our father was using her name to rob this woman blind was a specific kind of torture. "Mrs. Caldwell," I started, sitting on the ottoman across from her. "We are here because, well, we found some paperwork at my grandmother's house. We wanted to ask you about your accounts." Marjorie sighed. It was a long rattling sound. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "There is not much to talk about, dear," she said. "The money is gone. I made peace with that last year. I had to sell my house to stay here, but at least I am not on the street." "Grandma, Evelyn didn't take it," Taryn blurted out. Her voice was fierce, desperate. "She would never hurt you." "Oh, I know that," Marjorie said, looking at Taryn with surprise. "Evelyn was a saint. She fought them. You know, when she found out what happened, she came here and cried. I had never seen Evelyn Green cry in 30 years. "Who did take it?" "Marjorie," I asked gently, "do you remember the name of the person who helped you move the funds?" "It wasn't Evelyn," Marjorie said, staring out the window again. "It was the consultant she recommended, or the one who said he worked with her. He was very charming, handsome man. He told me that the market was turning and we needed to move my retirement into a high-yield annuity." "Grant Hollis," I said. Marjorie nodded. "That was him. Mr. Hollis. He came to my house. He brought pastries. He sat at my kitchen table and explained everything so clearly. He said Evelyn was getting older, that she was handling the relationship side, but he was handling the technical investments." She paused, and her next words made the blood freeze in my veins. "He said he had a junior partner," Marjorie said, "a young woman. He said she handled the administrative side. He told me, 'Taryn Green is my junior partner. She is Evelyn's granddaughter. It keeps the paperwork smooth. We like to keep it in the family.'" I heard Taryn draw in a sharp, jagged breath. "He used my name," she whispered. "He told you I was working for him." "He said you were bright," Marjorie said, offering a sad smile. "He said you were the one who would be double-checking all the transfers. It made me feel safe, you know, knowing that Evelyn's family was watching the money." Taryn looked like she was going to be sick. She stood up abruptly and walked to the corner of the room. Turning her back to us, I could see her shaking. Graham hadn't just used her identity on paper. He had used her existence, her relationship to Evelyn, as a psychological lever to pry open the bank accounts of vulnerable old women. He had sold Taryn's integrity to people she had never met. "Marjorie," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, "did you ever see this man again after the money was moved?" "No," she said. "The phone number he gave me was disconnected, and when I called the firm he claimed to work for, they had never heard of him. That was when Evelyn started investigating. She was furious. She told me she was going to fix it." Marjorie gestured to a corkboard hanging on the wall near the television. It was covered in flyers for bingo nights, cafeteria menus, and photos from community events. "That is why it was so confusing," Marjorie said. "I thought the whole family was involved in helping seniors. I saw that nice woman, your mother, I think, speaking about it just a few months ago." I followed her gaze. Pinned to the board was a newsletter from the assisted living facility dated from last October. The headline read, "Protecting Our Legacy, a Night with the Foundation." There was a photo. It was my mother, Elena. She was standing at a podium wearing a cream-colored blazer, holding a microphone. She looked elegant, concerned, and deeply empathetic. "She gave a speech here," Marjorie said, "about financial abuse, about how we need to be careful with our assets. She was so articulate. I remember thinking, if Evelyn's daughter-in-law is this passionate about protecting us, surely the consultant was just a mistake. I stared at the photo. My mother wasn't just notarizing documents in the dark. She was the public face of the distraction. She was out there giving speeches about protecting seniors while her husband was robbing them, creating a smoke screen of respectability so thick that no one would dare look behind the curtain. She looks very kind, Marjorie said. Yes, I said, my voice tasting like gash. She is very good at looking kind. We left 10 minutes later. I thanked Marjorie and promised her that we were not done fighting. Taryn was silent as we walked out to the parking lot, the rain plastering her hair to her face. Jude was waiting for us by my car. He was leaning against the hood, his arms crossed, his face wet with rain. He hadn't come inside. He had said he needed to make a call, but now, seeing the look on his face, I realized that wasn't the reason. You knew her, I said to him. Jude looked at the entrance of the facility, his jaw working. Marjorie was my third-grade teacher. She taught me how to read when everyone else thought I was just a dumb kid who liked to hit things with hammers. He looked at me and his eyes were red. She is my aunt. Is her my mom's sister. I felt the ground shift under my feet. Jude, I didn't know. I didn't tell you, Jude said, because I needed the job. I needed to get into that house. When Marjorie lost her money, she told me about the consultant. She told me about Evelyn getting suspicious. I knew something was buried in that frame. I just didn't know what. Does Graham know? I asked. Graham thinks I am just a contractor who works cheap, Jude said bitterly. He doesn't know who I am related to, but he knows something is up. Jude pushed off the car and walked closer to us. While you were inside, I called a buddy of mine in Seattle. He works in commercial security. I described the lockbox to him, and it is a Titan Series 4. Jude said they are rare. They are mostly used for diamond transport or high data storage. But here's the thing. My buddy said the company that makes them has a feature called a silent ping. If the box is opened by force or if the biometric scanner fails 3 times, it sends a GPS coordinate to the registered owner's app. Taryn is the registered owner, I said. On paper, Jude said, but who has the phone that receives the alerts? I thought about the burner phone Evelyn had mentioned in her notes, the one Graham used to play the role of Grant Hollies. Graham, I whispered. Exactly, Jude said. And there is one more thing. I called my foreman, the guy who was at the site this morning before you got there. He said a man stopped by around 7, said he was an insurance adjuster checking on the renovation liability. Let me guess, Taryn said, her voice shaking. Silver hair, expensive suit, won't make eye contact. He asked where we were working, Jude said. My foreman told him we were opening up the loft new wall. The guy didn't stay. He just got in his car and drove off. He was scouting it. I said he knew the box was there. He knew we were getting close. And if that box sent a silent alert when we opened it, he knows we found it. Jude finished. He knows the evidence is out in the open. He has the box now. Taryn said. He took it, but he doesn't have the key card. I said, patting my pocket. And he doesn't have the digital files I downloaded. Sir, Jude said, his voice urgent. If he knows the box was opened, he is going to go into damage control mode. He is going to try to scrub the house. There might be other things hidden there, things he couldn't put in the box. The laptop, I said, realizing with a jolt of panic where I had left my computer bag. I left my laptop bag at the A-frame in the kitchen. It has the hard drive with the backups of Evelyn's folder. We have to go, Jude said. Now I drove like a maniac back toward the mountain. The rain had turned into a deluge, the wipers slapping frantically against the glass. The road to the A-frame was a winding ribbon of black asphalt, slick with pine needles. My mind was racing. Graham wasn't just a thief. He was a man who had been cornered, and a cornered man with nothing to lose was dangerous. He had spent years building a narrative where he was the hero and his daughter was the screw-up. He wouldn't let that story unravel without a fight. He texted me again, Taryn said, looking at her phone. He said, I am at the house. We can fix this. Do not reply, I said. He sounds calm, Taryn said. That is what scares me. He always sounds calm right before he does something terrible. We turned off the highway onto the gravel access road. The trees closed in around us, blocking out the gray light of the afternoon. The A-frame sat at the end of the lane, its dark peak rising into the mist like a jagged tooth. I slammed on the brakes as we crested the final hill. There, parked in the muddy driveway, was the silver SUV. "He is here," Jude said, reaching for the door handle before the car had even fully stopped. "Wait," I said. I looked through the windshield. The house was dark except for a single work light that had been left on in the loft. It cast a harsh, yellow glow against the plastic sheeting covering the windows. Through the large triangular window, I could see movement. Two figures. One was wearing a tool belt, one of Jude's crew members, who must have stayed behind or come back. The other was my father. Graham was standing by the railing of the loft. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't frantically tearing up floorboards. He was leaning against the railing, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a coffee cup. He was smiling. He was talking to the worker, gesturing casually around the space as if he were discussing paint colors or light fixtures. He looked completely, terrifyingly at ease. He looked like a man who owned the place. He looked like a man who had already won. "He is talking to Ricky," Jude said. "Ricky is just a kid. He doesn't know anything. He is charming him," I said, watching my father laugh at something the boy said. "He is establishing his presence. He is making sure that if anyone asks, he was just a concerned father checking on the construction." Then Graham turned. He looked straight out the window. Even through the rain in the distance, I felt his gaze lock onto my car. He didn't look surprised to see us. He didn't look guilty. He raised his coffee cup in a mock salute. "He knew we were coming," I whispered. "He wants us here." "Why?" Taryn asked. "Because," I said, unbuckling my seat belt with trembling hands. "He can't frame you if you are not in the picture. He needs you in that house, Taryn. He needs you to leave your fingerprints on the scene." I opened the car door. The smell of wet pine and ozone hit me. "Stay close to me," I told Taryn, "and do not sign anything. Do not even say yes if he asks if you want water." We walked toward the house, the gravel crunching under our feet like bones. My father was waiting for us, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into his house. I was walking into his trap. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white through the rain-streaked windshield. I watched my father smiling in the loft of the A-frame, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch for the construction crew. He looked untouchable. He looked like a man who had already buried the bodies and planted the flowers. "We cannot go in there," I said, my voice tight. "Not yet. If we walk in now, we are playing by his rules. He will spin this. He will make us look hysterical in front of witnesses." "So what do we do?" Taryn asked, her eyes fixed on the house with a look of pure terror. "We can't just leave him there with the evidence." "We get backup," I said. "Real backup, not the police he can manipulate. We go to the one person Grandma actually trusted." I threw the car into reverse. The tires spun in the mud before catching the gravel, and we backed down the driveway, leaving the house and the man who had stolen our lives behind us. 30 minutes later, we were in a small, nondescript office building on the outskirts of Bend, tucked behind a dental clinic. The sign on the frosted glass door read, "Dorsey Associates Compliance and Auditing." Inside, the office smelled of stale coffee and laser printer toner. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with shelves groaning under the weight of thick color-coded binders. It was a fortress of bureaucracy, the kind of place where excitement went to die, which made it the perfect hiding place for the truth. Marianne Dorsey was waiting for us. She was a woman cut from the same cloth as my grandmother's sensible shoes, a sharp bob of gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't offer us tea. She locked the door behind us and pulled the blinds. "I wondered when you would find the breadcrumbs," Marianne said. She walked behind her desk and sat down, folding her hands over a stack of files. "Evelyn said you were sharp." "Yes, sir," she said. "Taryn had the heart, but you had the teeth." "My father is at the house," I said, ignoring the compliment. "He has the lock box. He thinks he has cleaned everything up." "He hasn't," Marianne said calmly. "But he is close." "You knew," Taryn said, her voice trembling. "You knew what he was doing to me. You knew he was using my name." Marianne looked at Taryn and her expression softened into something profound and sad. "We knew Taryn, but we were trapped." "Trapped?" I asked. "Grandma was an estate planner. You are a compliance officer. You could have gone to the authorities. You could have shut him down. With what proof?" Marianne asked. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick binder. "Evelyn came to me 8 months ago. She had found the first discrepancy, a withdrawal from the Caldwell account. She traced it just like you did, and she found your signature." Marianne slid the binder across the desk. It was filled with the same documents I had seen in the digital folder, but these were annotated in red ink. "Evelyn wanted to go to the police immediately," Marianne continued. "She was ready to tear Graham apart, but I stopped her. I made her look at the evidence objectively. If we had handed this over to the district attorney 6 months ago, who do you think would be in handcuffs right now?" She looked pointedly at Taryn. "The paper trail is perfect," Marianne said. "The IP addresses for the transfers trace back to a router that was registered in your name. The P.O. box was opened with a copy of your driver's license. The notary stamps, which we now know are your mother's handiwork, authenticate your presence at sightings you never attended. To the law, Graham is just a grieving son trying to manage an estate. You are the desperate, indebted daughter who embezzled $2 million. $2 million, I whispered. The number hung in the air like toxic smoke. $22,400,000, a new voice said. I spun around. A woman had stepped out from the back room. She was younger than Marianne, perhaps in her late 30s, wearing a dark blazer and jeans. She had a badge clipped to her belt and the weary, cynical posture of someone who spent her days reading tragic bank statements. "This is Agent Dana Rios." Marianne said. "She is with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. We have been building a case," Agent Rios said, walking over to lean against a filing cabinet. "But it is like trying to catch smoke with a net. Your father is good. He knows the blind spots in the banking regulations better than most bankers." "If you are the FBI," Taryn said, "why haven't you arrested him?" "Because we need intent," Rios said, "and we need proof of control. Right now, every document says you are the criminal, Taryn. If I arrest Graham today, his hybrid lawyers will paint him as a victim of familial betrayal. He will cry on the stand. He will say he had no idea his daughter was capable of such things, and without a smoking gun that links him directly to the execution of these trades, a jury might believe him." Rios looked at me. "That is why the lockbox mattered. Marianne told me about the letter. If you have the original letter from Evelyn and the key card to the secondary location, we might have a chance, but we need to move fast." "I have the key card," I said, "and I have digital copies of the letter." "Digital copies are good for intelligence," Rios said, "but in court, for a fraud this complex, we need the physical chain of custody. We need to prove that Graham knew about the setup." She paused, her dark eyes scanning my face. "There is something else you need to understand. Isser, this isn't just about your father. Men like Graham Greene rarely work in a vacuum. You do not move $2 million through shell accounts without help." "My mother," I said, "we saw her signature. Elena is part of it." Rios nodded. "But we suspect it goes wider. We have seen this pattern before. In the Pacific Northwest, there is a network of consultants who specialize in what we call familial identity shielding. They find a family member, usually one who is vulnerable, isolated, or financially unstable, and they build a frame around them. They use them as a human shield for high asset stripping." "So he didn't just come up with this," Taryn whispered, horrified. "He bought a playbook. He bought a system," Rios corrected. "And right now, the system is blinking red. Graham knows the lockbox was compromised. He knows you are in town. When suspects like this feel the heat, they do two things. They liquidate the assets, and they sever the loose ends." "I am the loose end," Taryn said. "You are the liability," Rios said bluntly. "As long as you are alive and talking, you are a problem. But if you were to, say, disappear, or if you were to face a sudden mental health crisis that discredited your testimony, that solves his problem." The room went cold. I thought of the text message. "We need to talk alone." "Marianne," I said, turning back to the desk, "you said there was a fail-safe in the car. Jude mentioned Evelyn had a backup plan. Marianne took a deep breath. She looked terrified. Evelyn was dying. Marianne said she knew she might not make it to the trial. So she set up a digital dead man switch. She uploaded a massive cache of documents to a secure server. Emails, recordings, bank records. She set a timer. If she didn't log in to reset it every 30 days, the system would automatically email the entire zip file to the SEC, the IRS, and the local police. That sounds like a good thing. I said it would be. Marianne said, except the file isn't finished. Evelyn died before she could annotate the last batch of documents. The unorganized raw data just looks like a record of Taryn's crimes. If that dump goes out to the authorities tomorrow without the context of the letter or the second door, it will trigger an immediate arrest warrant for Taryn. When does the timer run out? I asked. Marianne checked her watch. It was set to a 90-day cycle after her death. She said the automatic release is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9:00. So we have less than 24 hours. I said we have to prove Graham is the operator before the system accidentally frames Taryn for good. We need to get into that second door. Rio said. Evelyn's note said there was a key card. Do you know where the panel is? I think so. I said Grandpa used to have a hidey hole in the loft. He covered it up years ago. But if Evelyn reopened it, then we have to go back to the A-frame. Rio said tonight I can get a warrant, but it will take time I do not have. If we can get the physical evidence from that second location, I can bring him in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a long-sustained vibration. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. I stared at the words, feeling the air leave my lungs. I told your dad you are spiraling. He is worried. He says you're talking crazy about conspiracies. Please, Isser, come home and stop this before you hurt your sister even more. What is it? Taryn asked. I showed her the screen. She is trying to gaslight me, I said, my voice low and furious. She is trying to make me doubt my own sanity. She is setting the stage so that if I go to the police, they will say, oh, that is just the hysterical daughter. She isn't protecting us, Taryn said, her voice hardening. She never was. I looked at Agent Rios. My father is at the house right now. He thinks he has won. He thinks I am just a scared little girl who is going to come running home because Mommy told me to use that. Rios said, let him believe he is in control. Walk into that house. Keep him talking. Keep him occupied. I will have a teen in position in the woods. But you need to get him to admit it, Isser, or you need to find that packet in the wall before he does. He doesn't know about the second door. I said he only knew about the box. Then you have an advantage. Marianne said, but be careful. A man who would frame his own child is capable of anything. I typed a reply to my mother. My fingers were steady now. Okay, we are coming. We just want to talk. I hit send. Let's go, I said to Taryn. It is time to go home. We walked out into the rain, the plan forming in my mind like a structure taking shape. We were going back to the house built from Summers. But we weren't going there to play. We were going there to tear the walls down. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest submerged in a heavy, dripping silence. We parked the car at the bottom of the driveway and walked up to the A-frame, the wet gravel crunching softly under our boots. I had my laptop bag slung over one shoulder, recovered from where I had left it, and a briefcase in my hand. I was not Isser Green, the terrified daughter. I was Isser Green, the crisis manager. I was the woman who had sat across from CEOs as their companies burned to the ground and convinced them that the fire was actually a restructuring opportunity. Remember the plan? I whispered to Taryn as we reached the front porch. We are just cleaning up the paperwork. We are confused, but we are compliant. We need them to feel safe. I feel like I'm going to throw up, Taryn whispered back. She looked pale, her face drawn in the harsh light of the motion sensor that flicked on above the door. Let them talk, I said, and whatever you do, do not sign anything until I read it. We walked inside. The house was cold. The construction crew had left for the day. The plastic sheeting over the windows rippled in the draft, making the whole living room feel like it was breathing. I set my briefcase on the dining table, a heady slab of raw edge walnut that my grandfather had planed himself. I laid out a few innocuous files, tax assessments, the renovation permit, the utility bills. "We are just resolving the estate," I said to the empty room, practicing the lie. "Just standard procedure." The sound of a car door slamming outside made us both jump. "That is Mom," Taryn said. "I know the sound of her engine." Eleanor Green walked in 2 minutes later. She was wearing a beige trench coat, tied tightly at the waist, and she carried a plastic container of soup. It was such a maternal gesture, bringing food to the children she was helping to destroy, that I almost laughed. "There you are," Eleanor said, shaking the rain off her umbrella. "Your father is parking the car. He brought Simon with him." "Simon?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Simon Vance, the lawyer. He is a family friend." "Is Sir," Eleanor said, setting the soup on the counter. "Graham thought it would be best to have someone neutral here to make sure everything is done correctly. We don't want any more misunderstandings." She walked over to Taryn, who was standing by the fireplace, hugging her arms around herself. "Oh, honey," Eleanor cooed, reaching out to smooth Taryn's hair. Taryn stood frozen, letting her mother touch her. "You look exhausted. This has been so hard on you, hasn't it? The confusion, the stress." "It has been hard," Taryn said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," Eleanor said. She reached into her oversized purse. "That is why I wanted to get here a minute before your father. I wanted to give you a chance to make this go away before the men start talking about legal codes." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't on legal letterhead. It was plain white paper dense with text. "What is this?" Taryn asked. "It is just a statement of clarification," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It tells the probate court that you were overwhelmed, that you might have mixed up some accounts during your divorce. If you sign this, we can file it with the estate, and your father can pay back any missing funds from his own pocket. No police, no investigation, just a family correcting a mistake." She held out a pen, an expensive Mont Blanc. "Just sign it, Taryn," Eleanor said, her eyes wide and pleading. "Let us take care of you. You know you aren't good with these things." Taryn looked at the pen. I saw her hand twitch. For a second, I thought she was going to do it. The conditioning ran deep. She had spent her whole life being told she was the messy one, the one who needed saving. "Let me see that," I said. I didn't wait for permission. I snatched the paper from my mother's hand. Eleanor's face hardened instantly. "It doesn't concern you. This is between me and your sister." I scanned the document. It was formatted like a standard affidavit, but the language was lethal. "I, Taryn Green, hereby admit that during the period of 2019 to present, I acted independently to secure funds due to personal financial distress without the knowledge or consent of other family members." It wasn't a clarification. It was a confession. If Taryn signed this, she was admitting to federal wire fraud. She was exonerating Graham and Eleanor completely. It was a suicide note for her future. "You wrote this," I said, looking up at my mother. "This isn't Simon's writing. This is yours. Acted independently. Personal financial distress. You are trying to get her to confess to crimes Dad committed. I am trying to keep her out of prison." Eleanor snapped. The mask of the concerned mother vanished, replaced by a flash of pure venomous irritation. "Do you have any idea what will happen if this goes to court? Your father will hire the best defense team in the state. They will tear her apart. They will bring up her credit score, her divorce, her therapy sessions. They will destroy her." "So you decided to do it for them?" I asked, my voice rising. "Someone has to be the adult," Eleanor shouted. She turned on Taryn, pointing a manicured finger at her chest. "You have always been a liability, Taryn. Always. The car accidents, the failed marriage, the constant need for money. We have carried you for 28 years. And now, when your father finally finds a way to secure our future, to build something that lasts, you are going to ruin it because you are too selfish to take a little bit of the blame." Taryn stepped back, her eyes wide with shock. "Secure our future? You mean steal from old women?" "It is not stealing," Eleanor hissed. "It is management. Those people, they are vegetables, Taryn. They sit in those homes and rot while their assets lose value to inflation. Your father was putting that capital to work. He was building a legacy for us, for you. I don't want it, Taryn said, her voice shaking but clear. I don't want a legacy built on Marjorie Caldwell's life savings. The front door opened. Graham walked in. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat, looking every inch the grieving, dignified son. Beside him was Simon Vance, a man with a smile like a shark and a briefcase that cost more than my car. Ladies, Graham said, his voice booming and cheerful. I hope we are not arguing already. We have a lot to get through. He walked into the room, bringing the smell of cold rain and expensive cologne with him. He saw the paper in my hand and the look on Eleanor's face. He didn't flinch. He just sighed, a sound of patient disappointment. Eleanor, he said softly, I told you to wait for Simon. I was trying to help, Elena muttered, taking the affidavit from me and shoving it back into her purse. She wouldn't look at Taryn. Let's sit, Graham said. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table, Grandpa's chair, and sat down. Simon sat to his right. I sat on the opposite side next to Taryn. I placed my phone on the table face down. The recording app was already running. So Graham said, clasping his hands, Isser tells me there is some confusion about the estate paperwork. Something about a box. It is not confusion, Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady. I opened my file. We found the locked box. We found the letter Grandma left. And we found the records of the transfers. Alleged records, Simon Vance said. His voice was like oil. My client has not seen these documents, and frankly, relying on the scribblings of a woman who was heavily medicated for stage 4 cancer is legally dubious at best. Grandma wasn't medicated when she wrote the letter, I said, and the bank records aren't scribblings. They are facts. $2 million moved through Shell accounts registered to Taryn's name. Graham chuckled. It was a warm paternal sound that made my skin crawl. Isser, darling, he said, you work in marketing. You understand optics. Taryn has had difficulties. We all know that. Is it so hard to believe that she might have tried to solve her money problems in a way that wasn't entirely legal? I didn't do it, Dad, Taryn said. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I am not saying you did it out of malice, sweetheart, Graham said, looking at her with pity. I am saying you were desperate. Maybe you met someone, some boyfriend who convinced you to use your access to Mom's files. It happens. We can fix it. But you have to be honest with us. Stop gaslighting her, I said. We went to the Pines today. We spoke to Marjorie Caldwell. Graham went perfectly still. His eyes, which had been warm and condescending, suddenly turned flat. Marjorie, he said, how is the old girl? She is broke, I said, because a consultant named Grant Hollis convinced her to liquidate her savings. A consultant who told her that Taryn Green was his junior partner. Grant Hollis, Graham repeated. He shook his head. Never heard of him. Sounds like Taryn might have been working with someone dangerous. Marjorie said Grant Hollis liked to bring her pastries. I said, leaning forward. She said he was charming. She said he told her that the market was turning and she needed to protect her assets. Marjorie is 90 years old, Graham said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. Her memory is Swiss cheese. She probably confused Taryn with a nurse. She recognized Mom, I said, from the photo on the bulletin board. So, Graham said, your mother is a public figure in the charity world. That proves nothing. It proves you were targeting them. I said, you and Mom, you identified the vulnerable clients through Grandma's files and then you used Taryn's identity to rob them. This is absurd, Simon interrupted. Graham, we do not need to listen to this unless they have a signed confession or a direct witness. This is all hearsay. I have the login to the server. I lied. I have the IP addresses. They trace back to your home office. Graham, not Taryn's apartment. You are bluffing, Graham said. But he shifted in his chair. And I asked. Grandma was meticulous. She tracked every keystroke. She knew you were Grant Hollis. She has a recording of you admitting it. She has a recording of a conversation. Graham snapped. A private family conversation where I was trying to calm down a hysterical woman who thought the CIA was stealing her stamps. I didn't mention stamps, I said softly. Graham blinked. But I didn't mention stamps, I repeated, and neither did the recording. The room went deadly silent. Brandmar's letter didn't mention stamps, I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs. The digital files didn't mention stamps, but you just did. Why would you bring up stamps, Dad? Graham stared at me. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the armor. It was a figure of speech, he said. His voice was tight. No, I said. It wasn't. There was a file I couldn't open. It was labeled the stamp collection. I thought it was literal, but it wasn't, was it? It was a code name for a specific set of bonds. I was improvising, pulling a thread I barely saw, but I saw it land. Graham's face drained of color. You accessed the encrypted partition, he whispered. He hadn't meant to say it. It slipped out, a reflex of pure panic. He thought I had seen the one thing he was truly afraid of. I accessed everything, I said, holding his gaze. The second door. Dad, we found the second door. Graham stood up. The chair scraped violently against the wooden floor, a harsh shriek that echoed in the high ceiling of the loft. The second door, he repeated. He looked wild now. The suave businessman was gone. He looked like an animal that hears a twig snap in the dark. He looked at me, then at Taryn, and then his eyes darted up toward the loft, toward the wall where the box had been. You are lying, he said. There is no second door. Evelyn wasn't that smart. She was smarter than you, Taryn said. She knew you would find the box. She knew you would think you won. Graham looked at Simon. Get the car. Graham, sit down, Simon said, looking nervous. We are leaving, but do not do anything rash. I said get the car. Graham ran. Simon stood up and backed away toward the door. Graham didn't follow him. Instead, he turned and strode toward the spiral staircase. Dad, what are you doing? I asked, standing up. You think you are so clever? Graham spat over his shoulder. He started climbing the stairs, his heavy footsteps clanging on the metal. You think a few computer files are going to bring me down? I built this life. I paid for this house. I paid for your education. Issa, where are you going? Eleanor cried out. Graham stopped. He reached the loft. He walked straight to the corner where he had left the black lock box. He hadn't taken it with him earlier. He had left it there, probably thinking it was safe in his territory. He picked it up. It was heavy, but he hoisted it onto his shoulder like it was nothing. This is the evidence, he shouted down at us from the railing. He looked deranged, framed by the plastic sheeting and the work lights. This box, the one with Taryn's name on it. As long as I have this, you have nothing but stories. Put it down, Graham. I said, it is over. The FBI knows. The FBI knows what you tell them, he yelled. And without this box, without the original documents inside it, they have nothing. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was panicked. He had forgotten that I told him the box was a decoy. Or maybe he didn't believe me. He was clinging to the physical object, the tangible proof of his power. I am taking it, he said, moving toward the stairs. I am taking it to protect this family. And if you try to stop me, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said it all. He wasn't a father anymore. He was a man holding a grenade, and he was willing to pull the pin if it meant he didn't have to walk out in handcuffs. Dad, Taryn whispered. Please, he ignored her. He took the first step down the spiral stairs, the black box resting on his shoulder, his eyes fixed on the front door. Move, he said to me, or I will make you move. Graham walked out the front door with the black steel box on his shoulder, and the sound of the heavy latch clicking shut behind him felt like a gavel coming down on my sister's life. I stood frozen in the center of the living room, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I touched the pocket of my jeans. The plastic key card was still there, warm against my thigh. I had the key, but Graham had the lock, and more importantly, he had the physical vessel that tied Taryn's name to the crime. Without that box, without the laser-etched name and the serial numbers. The story became abstract again. It became a war of digital files, and my father could afford better experts than we could. He is taking it, Taryn whispered. She was staring at the closed door, her face a mask of absolute defeat. He is going to drive to the river and throw it in, or he is going to take a blowtorch to it. He can't go far, I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted it to have. Rios has a team in the woods. My phone buzzed. It was Agent Rios. He put the box in his trunk. Rios's voice came through tight and urgent. But he is not leaving the property. He is sitting in the car making a call. My team is holding position. But, sir, we have a problem. What problem? I asked, pacing toward the window. I could see the silhouette of the silver SUV through the trees, its brake lights cutting through the gloom. If he destroys that box, Rios said, we lose the physical link. The digital evidence you have is strong, but it is circumstantial. A defense attorney will argue that Tarrant's computer was hacked, that the files were planted. The box was the smoking gun because it was a physical object ordered, paid for, and hidden. If that disappears and we don't get a confession, this becomes a he said, she said case. And your father is very good at talking. So we need him to admit it, I said. Or we need to find what is behind the second door before he destroys the box. We need both, Rios said. He is getting out of the car. He is coming back toward the house. He looks composed. He thinks he has neutralized the threat. He is coming back. Tarrant asked, overhearing the tiny voice on the speaker. He wants to close the deal. I realized he thinks I am scared. He thinks if he pressures me enough, I will sign the estate over to him just to make the conflict stop. Tarrant sat down at the table, opening her phone. Her hands were shaking, but she looked focused, like she was looking for something specific. Sir, she said, her voice dropping to a strange hollow tone. Come look at this. I walked over. Tarrant was logged into her email account. She was in the advanced settings menu, a place I knew she never visited. I was thinking about what Rios said, Tarrant said, pointing at the screen, about how he knew everything, how he knew when I applied for loans, how he knew when I got the collection notices. I always thought he just sensed it, or that Mom told him. She tapped a line of text on the screen. Forwarding rule created November 18th, 2018. Condition all incoming mail containing keyword bank, loan, verify tax action forward to copy ghinsulting.com action mark is read archive immediately. I felt the blood drain from my face. He has been reading my mail for 7 years. Tarrant whispered. He set this up right after my divorce. Remember, he bought me that new laptop as a fresh start present. He must have configured it before he even gave it to me. Brant Hollis Consulting. I read the address. He didn't just steal your identity, Tarrant. He curated your failure. He archived the alerts, Tarrant said, tears welling in her eyes. All those times I missed payments, it wasn't because I was irresponsible. It was because I never saw the bills. He was intercepting them. He was letting my credit score tank on purpose so that when he started opening the shell accounts, no one would question why my financial history was a disaster. It was a level of betrayal that went beyond greed. It was psychological vivisection. He had watched his daughter drown for 7 years, and instead of throwing her a rope, he had been the one adding water to the pool. He made me believe I was broken, Tarrant said, her voice cracking. I spent years hating myself because I couldn't keep my life together, and he was doing it to me. The front door opened. Graham walked back in. He didn't have the box. It was locked in his car, now safe. He walked in with his hands in his pockets. The picture of the benevolent, weary patriarch dealing with difficult children. Eleanor trailed behind him, looking pale and refusing to make eye contact. All right, Graham said, clapping his hands together softly. Let's finish this. I have sent Simon home. I think this is better handled as a family. He walked to the table and pulled a folder from his coat pocket. He placed it in front of me. What is this? I asked, closing Tarrant's laptop, but leaving it on the table. It is the transfer of authority, Graham said. Since you Burrells are clearly overwhelmed by the discovery of the irregularities in the attic, I am willing to step in. This document gives me full power of attorney over the estate and the renovation. It allows me to handle the sale and deal with any legacy issues Mom left behind. Legacy issues, I repeated. You mean the fraud. I mean the mess. Graham corrected, his voice hardening slightly. Sir, be reasonable. Tarrant is in trouble. Real trouble. If the IRS sees those accounts, she goes to prison. I can fix it. I can make the debts disappear. I can absorb the liability into the larger estate holdings, but I need control. I cannot save her if you are fighting me for the steering wheel. He took a gold pen from his pocket and set it down next to the paper. "Sign it," he said. "For Taryn." I looked at the document. It was a trap. If I signed this, I was giving him legal cover to liquidate everything: the house, the hidden accounts, the evidence. He would wash the money, burn the paper trail, and leave Taryn holding the bag for the past 7 years of mismanagement. "You want me to sign away the house?" I said. "The house where you hid the box." "I am trying to be efficient," Graham said, flashing a tight smile. "We are wasting time. Did you ask about the walls?" Jude asked from the doorway. Graham spun around. Jude had been standing in the kitchen shadows, silent until now. "Excuse me," Graham said. "3 months ago," Jude said, walking into the light, "before we even started demo, you called me. You asked me about the load-bearing capacity of the knee walls in the loft. You asked if there were any voids that needed to be filled." "I was concerned about insulation," Graham said dismissively. "You were looking for it," Jude said. "You knew Evelyn hid something, but you didn't know exactly where. You sent that insurance adjuster this morning to see if we had found it. You weren't protecting the family. Graham, you were hunting." "I am done listening to the hired help," Graham snapped. He turned back to me, leaning both hands on the table. "Isart, sign the paper. Taryn needs this." "Taryn doesn't need you." "I said she knows about the email rule." Graham froze. It was a subtle reaction, a slight twitch of his left eye, a momentary stillness in his breathing, but it was there. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "November 2018, Taryn said." She didn't look down. She looked straight at him, her eyes burning with a cold. "New fire. You set up a forwarding rule on my laptop. You sent every bank notification to GH Consulting. You archived my bills so I wouldn't see them. You were struggling." Graham said, "I was monitoring you. I wanted to make sure you didn't get into trouble. You made sure I failed." Taryn shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "You sabotaged me. You needed a sigh. And you decided your own daughter was pathetic enough to fit the role." "I didn't decide you were pathetic," Graham said, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You were pathetic, Taryn. Look at you. You have never finished a single thing you started. You were a walking disaster long before I got involved." "So you used me," Taryn said. "I utilized an asset that was going to waste." Graham roared. The mask was gone now. The veins in his neck were bulging. "Do you have any idea how much money was sitting in those accounts? Evelyn was letting it rot. She was managing portfolios for people who didn't even know what day of the week it was. I put that capital to use. I built a firm. I created wealth. And you put my name on the crimes," Taryn said. "Why me? Why not a stranger?" "Because you were invisible." The words rang out in the room like a gunshot. Graham stood there, chest heaving, his face red. He looked at Taryn with a sneer of absolute contempt. "I used your number because you were invisible," he said, breathing hard. "No one looks at you, Taryn. The banks didn't look at you. The IRS didn't look at you. You are the invisible one, the disappointment, the one everyone expects to fail. If a few $1 million moved through your accounts, no one would think it was a mastermind scheme. They would just think Taryn Green screwed up her paperwork again. It was the perfect camouflage." Silence stretched across the room. It was the silence of a bridge collapsing. "I am invisible," Taryn whispered. "You were," Graham said, "cry until your sister started digging." He looked at me then, and his eyes fell on the laptop bag sitting on the chair next to me. The bag I had recovered from the kitchen. He knew what I did for a living. He knew I documented everything. "You are recording this," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "And the cloud backup is already sinking." "You little witch," he snarled. He moved fast, faster than an old man should be able to move. He lunged across the table. I scrambled back, but he wasn't going for me. He grabbed the strap of my laptop bag. "No!" I shouted, grabbing the handle. He yanked it with violent force. The strap burned my palm, and the bag tore from my grip. "You think you can trap me?" Graham shouted, clutching the bag to his chest. "I am Graham Greene. I built this town." "Graham, stop!" Elena screamed, covering her face. He didn't stop. He turned and bolted for the back door, the sliding glass door that led to the deck and the dense forest beyond. "He has the backups," I yelled. "He has the hard drive." Let him go, Jude said calmly. But I turned to Jude, panic rising in my throat. He has the evidence. He has the box in the car and the backups in the bag. Graham shattered the screen door latch with his shoulder and disappeared into the rainy darkness. He is running into the woods, Taryn said, standing up. Where is he going? He is going to the burn pile, Jude said. He thinks he can burn the laptop in the drive. We have to stop him, I said, rushing toward the door. Isser, wait, Taryn said. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was strong. Why? I asked. He is destroying everything. Not everything, Taryn said. She pointed to the ceiling, to the loft, to the dark corner where the false wall had been broken open. He said I was invisible, Taryn said, her voice shaking with rage. He said no one looks at me. That means he didn't look at me either. He didn't think I was smart enough to find the real secret. The second door, I whispered. He is running because he is scared. Taryn said he thinks the laptop is the danger. He doesn't know about the key card. Agent Rios is out there. I said she will track him, but we have to get to the panel before he realizes the bag is just a distraction. I looked out the broken door. I could see my father's shadow moving frantically through the trees, a desperate ghost trying to outrun his own sins. Let him run, I said, turning back to the spiral staircase. We have a vault to open. I pulled the key card from my pocket. It felt heavy now, charged with the weight of 20 years of lies. Come on, I said to Taryn and Jude. Let's see what Grandma really left us. We ran up the stairs, leaving the storm outside for the storm within. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm against the A-frame's roof, echoing the pounding of my own heart as we scrambled up the spiral staircase. Below us, the front door was shattered, leaving the house open to the storm. But Graham was gone, vanished into the dark woods with my laptop bag, convinced he was burning the only evidence that could destroy him. He was wrong. Second door, I whispered, pulling the white key card from my pocket. Where is the second door? The loft was a chaotic landscape of plastic sheeting and work lights. Taryn stood in the center, turning in a slow circle, her eyes scanning the cedar planks she had stared at for 20 summers. It is not a literal door, Taryn said, her voice shaking but certain. It is Grandma. She loved puzzles. She loved hidden things. Think about the fort. Isser, where did we always hide our treasures? The chimney, Jude said. He was already moving toward the massive stone chimney that ran up the center of the house. The stones were rough, river-washed granite, but on the side facing the knee wall, the side where the false wall had been, there was a section of wood paneling that framed the masonry. I noticed this earlier, Jude said, running his hand along a piece of trim that looked just a little too wide, a little too new. The grain doesn't match the rest of the beam. I stepped forward. The key card in my hand felt hot. Look for a sensor, I said. It is magnetic. There has to be a reader. Jude ran his fingers under the lip of the wooden trim. He stopped. Here, he whispered. I pressed the white card against the wood. There was no beep, no digital chirp like the black box had made. Instead, there was a heavy mechanical thunk, the sound of a solenoid firing deep inside the wall. A section of the wood paneling about the size of a cereal box popped forward. I caught it before it could fall. Behind the panel wasn't a high-tech safe. It was a simple hollowed-out cavity lined with lead, and sitting inside, protected from fire, flood, and magnetic scanners, was a thick sealed pouch made of silver miyar. I pulled it out. It was heavy. On the front, written in permanent marker in Evelyn's steady hand, were 2 words. The truth. Open it, Taryn breathed. I ripped the seal. Inside was a stack of papers clipped together with military precision. It was the final draft. The first page was a summary written by Evelyn 3 weeks before she died. It laid out everything, dates, times, and account numbers, but it was the attachments that mattered. There were physical bank slips with Graham's handwriting on them instructing the transfers. There were photos of Graham meeting with the grant, Holly's burner phone on the table, and there was a printed email thread between Graham and an offshore banking firm explicitly asking how to structure an account so that the liability falls entirely on the secondary Sura. This is it, I said, flipping through the pages. This connects him directly. He didn't just use your name, Taryn. He signed the setup documents himself. Look, I held up a document. It was the original incorporation paper for the shell company. Taryn's name was typed as the owner, but the signature at the bottom, the one witnessed by the bank officer, was Graham's. He got sloppy. Jude said he thought no one would ever see the original. He thought Taryn was invisible. I said, feeling a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. He thought she was just a ghost he could wear. Downstairs we heard footsteps, heavy wet boots on the hardwood floor. Sir Graham's voice boomed up from the living room. Taryn, get down here. He was back. I looked at Agent Rios, who had quietly slipped in through the broken back door while we were upstairs. She had her weapon drawn, holding it low against her thigh. She nodded at me. Go, she mouthed. Get him to say it. I put the packet back in the pouch and held it against my chest like a shield. Ready? I asked Taryn. Taryn wiped her face. She looked terrified, but she stood up straighter than I had seen her in years. Ready, she said. We walked to the railing. Graham was standing in the middle of the living room. He was soaked to the bone, his expensive coat ruined, his silver hair plastered to his skull. He was shivering, but he looked triumphant. He held his hands out, empty. It is done, he announced, looking up at us. I'd burned it. The laptop, the drive. It is all ash in the fire pit. Eleanor was standing behind him, clutching her purse. She looked sick, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected the walls to collapse. You burned my laptop, I said, keeping my voice calm. You destroyed my property. I destroyed a cancer, Graham said, starting to climb the stairs. I saved this family, sir. Again, you were going to ruin everything with your little crusade. But now it is just my word against, well, against nothing. He reached the top of the landing. He stopped when he saw us. He saw Jude standing by the chimney with his arms crossed. He saw Taryn staring at him with ice in her veins. And he saw the silver pouch in my hand. Graham's smile faltered. What is that? He asked. It is the second door, Dad, I said. You were so busy burning the decoy, you forgot to check the walls. Give that to me, he said, taking a step forward. No, Taryn said. She stepped in front of me. You are not touching this, Taryn. Move, Graham snapped. I am your father. I am the only reason you aren't in jail right now. You are the reason I should be in jail. Taryn shouted. You stole my life, Dad. You stole my name. Why? Just tell me why. Was I really that worthless to you? You weren't worthless, Graham said, his voice dripping with frustration. You were useful. That is different. Useful? Taryn asked. Yes, useful. Graham yelled. Do you think building wealth is easy? Do you think I could just walk into a bank and move $3 million without raising flags? I needed a buffer. I needed someone whose financial history was already so chaotic that a few more red flags wouldn't matter. So you picked me, Taryn said. I picked the path of least resistance, Graham said, gesturing at her as if she were a broken appliance. It was so easy. Taryn, you never checked your mail. You never checked your credit. You signed whatever I put in front of you because you were desperate for approval. I didn't even have to try hard. I just nudged you and you fell right into the frame. You framed me, Taryn said. Say it. I protected my assets. Graham roared. And if that meant using your name to shield the principal, then yes, I did it, and I would do it again because I am the one who keeps the lights on in this family. I am the one who matters. That is enough, a voice said from the shadows. Graham spun around. Agent Rio stepped out from behind the chimney. Behind her, 3 other agents in tactical gear emerged from the darkness of the unlit corners of the loft. Graham Greene, Rio said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. I am placing you under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Graham froze. He looked at Rios, then at the agents, then back at the silver pouch in my hand. You, he stammered. You set me up. No, I said. You set yourself up. We just closed the trap. Eleanor, Graham shouted, looking down at the living room. Call Simon. Call the firm. But Eleanor wasn't reaching for her phone. She was standing by the front door where 2 more agents had just walked in. Mrs. Green, one of the agents said, we have questions about your notary stamp and the affidavit you filed. I didn't know. Eleanor cried out, her voice shrill. I did what he told me. He said it was for tax purposes. We have the emails. Mom, I called down from the loft. We have the messages where you told him which clients were the most vulnerable. You scouted them at your charity events. You aren't a victim. You are the bait. Helena looked up at me. For a second, I saw the mother. I thought I knew the woman who baked birthday cakes and bandaged scraped knees. But then I saw the truth. I saw the woman who had watched her husband dismantle her daughter's life and had handed him the screwdriver. "Isser, please," she whispered. "Don't," I said. The agents moved in on Graham. He didn't fight. He just sagged, the arrogance draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. As they clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists, he looked small. He looked old. He looked at Taryn one last time as they led him toward the stairs. "I did it for us," he muttered. "No," Taryn said, her voice steady and clear. "You did it to us." We watched them lead him down the spiral staircase. We watched the flashing blue lights of the cruisers illuminate the rain-slicked driveway. We watched our parents, the pillars of the community, the people who were supposed to love us unconditionally, get placed into separate cars. The house went quiet. Agent Rio stayed behind for a moment. She walked over to Taryn. "This packet," she said, nodding at the silver pouch I was still holding. "This changes everything. With his confession and these documents, you are no longer a person of interest. Taryn, you are a victim. We will start the process of clearing your credit and exputing the records tomorrow." "Thank you," Taryn whispered. "Your grandmother was a smart woman," Rios said. "She knew the justice system needed more than just a story. She gave us the map." Rios took the pouch as evidence, nodded to Jude, and walked down the stairs. We were alone in the loft. Jude walked over to the window and started taping up the plastic sheeting where the wind had torn it loose. He was giving us a moment. I looked at Taryn. She was leaning against the railing, looking down at the empty living room. The house felt different now, the oppressive weight, the feeling of the house holding its breath. It was gone. "He is gone," Taryn said. "Yeah," I said. "He is." "I am not invisible," she said softly. "You never were," I said. "He just refused to see you." Taryn turned to look at the corner where we used to build our forts, where we used to drag the quilts and the pillows and hide from the summer storms. "We have a lot of work to do," Taryn said. "The renovation, the legal stuff, Mom's trial. We can sell it," I said. "If you want, we can sell the house and never come back." Taryn looked around the loft. She looked at the exposed beams, the dusty floor, the secret panel that had saved her life. "No," Taryn said. "Grandma left this to us, not him. This is our house, Isser. It was built from our summers. He tried to turn it into a crime scene, but he failed." She reached out and took my hand. "I want to finish the renovation," she said. "I want to paint the walls. I want to make it ours again." I squeezed her hand. "Okay, we keep it." We stood there for a long time, listening to the rain soften into a gentle patter against the roof. The nightmare was over. The box was gone. The ghosts were exorcised. We had driven up that mountain thinking we were coming to fix a house. We thought we were dealing with paint samples and dry rot. But Evelyn Green knew better. She knew that some foundations are rotten long before the cracks show in the walls. One call stopped me cold on a Tuesday afternoon. It led us to a hidden wall, a stolen name, and a betrayal so deep it nearly drowned us. But as I stood there with my sister, alive and free, I realized that call didn't just change what we found in the attic. It changed who our family had been all along. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a trap. It looked like an open door. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe late at night? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the like button so this video can reach more people. See you in the next story. Thanks to all.